Don and Kevin have been working for the same salvaging company for years and were called to help with the salvaging of a dried-up submarine. However, that wasn't their only task this time, as they were also training a new employee, Carl. Once they arrived, the other workers were already busy with preparations. The trio's eyes grew big when they saw the submarine, but nobody could have predicted what they would find inside. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. But before they could make entry, some other preparations needed to be done. They measured the submarine's exterior and tried to find schematics. Once that was done, they could finally open the hatch. The submarine's door flew open, and Don already had a foot inside, but right at the moment, they were interrupted. It sounded like a whole army was approaching, and when the trio looked around, they were surprised to see multiple black SUVs with tinted windows. The cars stopped beside the submarine and ignored the warnings they had placed around it. Who would do such a thing? The answer to that question came when dozens of suited men stepped out and started surrounding the vessel. Finally, one of them began to yell upwards at the workers. The trio looked down in confusion as they saw the man yelling and gesturing. "What does he want?" one asked the others, who both shrugged. Curiosity got the better of them, so they went down to see what was happening, but they regretted their decision immediately. When the man in the suit felt it was taking too long, he started shouting, "Leave now, and hurry up, or we are going to use force." He put words into action as he grabbed the most nearby worker and started pushing. The trio looked at each other in shock before quickly stepping out of harm's way. Don, Kevin, and Carl quickly gathered their tools as more black cars appeared. It was clear these people were taking it very seriously, and then Kevin saw it. "Look," he said as he pointed toward one of the men exiting a car. They all stared at the man, who was wearing an FBI vest. The men couldn't believe it. "FBI? This is serious," they muttered among themselves. What could a government agency possibly want with an old submarine? The workers spent the rest of the day at a nearby restaurant, enjoying their unexpected day off from work. Eventually, as evening fell, most of the colleagues had already gone home, but Don, Kevin, and Carl remained. "Something strange is going on," Carl said decisively, and the others nodded. But what could they do about it? That question lingered on their mind, and they all thought the same thing. So, after grinding their brains in the restaurant all day, the trio decided there was one thing they could do: try to sneak into the submarine to see what was inside. By the time Don, Kevin, and Carl left the restaurant, it was already dark outside. "This is perfect," Don whispered as they sneakily moved through the shadows and observed the scene. Then their hearts dropped. "This just got a lot more complicated," Kevin murmured as they stared at the guards with guns. They were gonna sneak inside that submarine. In the dark, Don, Kevin, and Carl contemplated their next move. They could almost hear each other's hearts pound in their chest. "How do we get past them?" Don whispered nervously, eyeing the armed guards. Then Carl suddenly got an idea. "Listen, when you hear my signal, climb up as fast as you can," he instructed in a low, determined tone. Don and Kevin looked at each other in confusion. What signal? But before they could ask, Carl already vanished into the darkness. They watched him move toward a row of parked cars like a shadow. Don and Kevin waited anxiously as they lost sight of Carl for a moment, but then they saw him push down hard on one of the car's hoods. Lights flashed, and a loud alarm ruptured the silent night. The guards' attention instantly turned toward the vehicles, and they rushed over. So that was the signal. Don and Kevin quickly ran to the submarine, their footsteps covered by the loud noise of the car alarm. While the guards' attention was still on the cars, the duo swiftly climbed the ladder and reached the hatch in seconds. But where was Carl? Before Don and Kevin could look for him, the car alarm fell silent. They looked at each other and realized they had to go inside now. Otherwise, they would get caught. Don climbed through the open hatch first, and when Kevin joined him, they paused to catch their breath. They moved slowly and quietly, feeling a bit nervous but also excited to see what they would discover. Don, Kevin, and Carl carefully moved through the first compartment, their eyes scanning everything in sight. But to their disappointment, there appeared to be nothing unusual there. As they continued their way through different compartments, they stumbled upon modern food containers. Scattered throughout the submarine, they stood in stark contrast to the aged surroundings. Kevin quietly wondered why there would be fresh food in such an old vessel, suggesting someone had been there recently. The group grew more uneasy. Something didn't make sense, but they kept exploring. They stood in silence, wondering if the FBI's presence was simply due to the submarine's historical value. Don finally said, "Let's just go home." The others followed him, but as they made their way out, something unexpected happened. Kevin and Don walked ahead while Carl, trying to catch up, tripped on a metal rod. He reached out to steady himself and accidentally leaned on a desk. Suddenly, a hidden door creaked open behind him. "Guys, come here, you won't believe this," he shouted. Don and Kevin rushed back. Carl explained he'd triggered the door by falling against the desk. The door must be the reason for the FBI's sudden interest. A bit of fear set in, but curiosity prevailed, and they stepped through the hidden passage. It led to a room unlike the rest of the submarine. The spotless floors and bare walls gleamed, and in the center sat a small radio on a table. It looked oddly modern compared to the rest of the sub. They gathered around it. Kevin turned it on, and static filled the room. Carl adjusted the dial until a voice came through. Kevin's expression changed. "I know that voice," he said, and the others recognized a tooth man who had confronted them earlier that morning. They listened as the voice reported, "The perimeter is secure, boss. No one in or out. Civilians are clueless." The trio exchanged alarmed glances. The speaker was one of the guards stationed outside. This wasn't a simple salvage operation. They had stumbled into something much more serious. Carl noticed another door in the room and gestured for the others to follow. "Bring the radio," he said. Together, he and Kevin struggled to open the heavy door. When it finally gave way, what they saw left them speechless. The room beyond was filled with high-tech equipment. Monitors lined the walls, and everything was clean and modern, entirely out of place inside the decaying submarine. As they looked around in disbelief, one of the screens flickered to life, showing a live feed of the dock outside. More screens activated one by one. Some showed streets, others homes, even private bedrooms. The footage was invasive and unsettling. "This doesn't feel right," Carl said, and the others silently agreed. They began taking pictures and video documenting everything. Then, while Kevin and Don focused on the screens, Carl noticed something strange on the table. There was a file on the table, simple and out of place among the high-tech equipment. Carl grabbed it and called the others. Flipping through it, they found detailed personal information about individuals, including age and height. Without hesitation, Carl tucked it under his arm. As they debated what to do next, Carl and Kevin suggested leaving, but Don insisted they needed to expose what they'd found. While navigating the monitors, Don accidentally hit a button, setting off a blaring alarm. Red lights flashed as the sound echoed off the walls. Then came the guard's voice over the radio, confirming their worst fear: their presence was discovered. "Follow me!" Don shouted. Carl and Kevin grabbed the folder and radio and dashed after him. The hallways twisted around them in a chaotic maze. Eventually, the trio recognized the first compartment. They were close to the hatch. With the radio silent and no way to know if it was safe, they took a deep breath and climbed a ladder. Just as they emerged onto the dock, they heard voices again. "Entering the submarine now, sir." They looked back and saw two figures disappearing inside. They had escaped just in time. They hurried to their car, parked a safe distance away, and drove straight to their company's office. Though safe for the moment, they knew their involvement wasn't over. At the office, they sat in silence. Kevin slowly opened the folder again, uneasy. "What do we do now?" he asked. The file's contents felt heavier now. Could the guards come looking for it? Carl just smiled. "You have nothing to worry about." The smile caught them off guard. Carl's tone shifted. "I haven't been completely honest with you," he said. Don and Kevin grew tense. They barely knew Carl. Could they trust him? Then Carl revealed the truth. He was a CIA agent. The two stared at him in disbelief. Carl explained that his mission had been to uncover the activities taking place inside the submarine. Everything had changed once the organization showed up and took control. Seeing their alarm, Carl leaned in. "You're safe with me," he said, reassuring them. He went on to explain that the CIA had been monitoring the organization for some time, but didn't fully understand their use of the submarine until now. When word came that the vessel had surfaced, Carl posed as a salvage worker to infiltrate the operation. Everything had been going to plan until the situation escalated. As Don and Kevin thought back, it all started to make sense. Carl always seemed to know what to do, from triggering the car alarm to finding the hidden door. What seemed like chance now looked intentional. They exchanged a glance and laughed nervously. "So what did we get ourselves into?" Kevin finally asked. Carl revealed a chilling truth: the men posing as FBI agents were actually part of a dangerous network of hitmen. They used the FBI guys to keep others away from the submarine and their operations hidden. The realization sent a wave of dread through Don and Kevin. They had been steps away from lethal danger. Carl pulled out his phone and spread the folder's contents across the table. "These files are what the operation was about," he explained. Each page contained profiles of people the organization had been targeting. But suddenly, Kevin froze. He recognized one of the photos. It was Carl. The atmosphere turned grave. Carl had been a target all along. It meant the organization knew he had gotten close, and that others like Don and Kevin might also be at risk. "We need to act now," Carl said. There was no time to lose. Carl took charge. He rushed them to the car and began making urgent calls. As they neared the submarine, helicopters roared overhead and black SUVs sped past. "Those are the real FBI," Carl confirmed. At the dock, federal agents surrounded the submarine, ready to move in. Carl led the operation. With the agents, he re-entered the submarine and helped locate and arrest the imposters. Accessing the submarine's internal systems, the FBI uncovered the organization's digital network. Over the next few months, the CIA and FBI coordinated a massive effort to dismantle the entire network. Every lead was pursued, every member tracked. Eventually, after exhaustive investigations and lengthy trials, the organization was taken down. Every member received a heavy sentence. Kevin and Don, once accidental explorers, were hailed as heroes. News stories praised their courage and involvement. Carl, true to his role, remained behind the scenes. Their lives changed. What began as curiosity turned into a national story. When the submarine was officially donated to the local museum, Don and Kevin were invited to open the exhibit. They accepted with pride. As they stood beside the historic vessel, visitors swarmed them with questions. Late in the day, a filmmaker approached with a proposition, a documentary. Kevin and Don exchanged a knowing look. It was the perfect way to complete their story, and this time, they were ready to share it with the world.